Welcome to our panel. We have Justin Latif, who is the Chief of Staff at Pacific Media Network, former National Chief Press Secretary and journalist Janet Wilson, and Radio New Zealand's political editor for a little while longer, Jane Patterson. Good morning. Welcome to you all.
Hello.
I want to start with you, Justin, just on what was the issue of Pacific representation in Parliament. We have seen that diminished at this election.
Yeah.
What do you think, when you look at the Parliament right now, what do you think about how it may serve our Pacifica communities?
Look, it's obviously going to be an issue, I think, because it sends a message that people feel less seen, don't they, when there's less Pacific MPs, particularly in government. But I think for our older Pacific voters, Winston Peters and Shane Jones have huge respect within the community. Winston Peters has a Matai title, Shane Jones was an ambassador to Pacific. So I think they feel like he's their man. But I think for younger voters that it's going to hurt National, and particularly National's shown they've got potential in West Auckland to really eat into Labor's stronghold there. And so National does need to look at how do you have more MPs who can try and win those seats, and the Pacific representation will help them there if they're really serious about building on the success they've had in this election.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fascinating, isn't it? But diversity is something that Christopher Luxon has said that he does want to address. So, there is more work to do. What about Jerry this morning? What did you think, Janet? A statesman? Globe-trotting statesman?
Yeah, I thought Big Jer did really well this morning, actually. What I found interesting was his comments about China. They've always been there for a long time, nothing to see here, which is a slight deviation from what we would have got from the previous government, who were a little bit more nervous Nelly in terms of their approach to the Pacific,
yes,
and to their communications vis-a-vis the US versus China. So I found that interesting. And is he following the key line that we need to be seen to be more friendly towards China?
Jane, what did you think? You've been to lots of these Pacific Island forums. I think I might have covered a couple with you. But they are important, aren't they, actually, for New Zealand, for our region? And now they have growing importance globally.
Well, the Pacific's become a representation in some ways, or a symbol of that tussle between the US and China. I was thinking about 2012 in the Cook Islands, the Pacific Islands Forum, Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, coming to say that we see your region as important. And that was when it was becoming obvious that China was having an interest in the region, and obviously that geopolitical tussle has just amplified over the years. One of the really interesting things coming out of the Pacific Islands Forum is that deal between Australia and Tuvalu. So basically the first offer for people to come to Australia on the basis of climate change, but in return saying that Australia would have a lot of say over any security arrangements that Tuvalu might have, and obviously that would be with the likes of China, and we saw that Solomon's Pact last year. So
yeah, absolutely. And so how do you, because with all of this attention, there is an opportunity, isn't there, actually, for the nations in the Pacific. How do you think that it's playing out at the moment, Justin?
I mean, it's really interesting because I think New Zealand was actually in a really awkward position. If you watch the footage and talk to journalists who are there, Jerry was often on the sidelines. He didn't even go to the leaders' meeting in Atutaki. And so it put New Zealand was in this position where they couldn't actually make commitments and things. And so we at a time when the world is really showing a huge interest, we had to sort of almost sit on the sidelines to some extent. I think that's an issue. But what you're also seeing is that there's huge money coming in. Biden promised, he had a meeting with Pacific leaders in September, I think, or July, promised $200 million on top of an $800 million commitment last year. So I think, there's a lot happening, and we sort of have to get stuck in a little bit more, and we've probably missed a beat here by not having a representative who could actually speak for the government.
Yeah, at that top table.
Yeah.
And I think everybody accepts that, Carmel couldn't take those decisions. Janet, what about Jerry for Foreign Minister?
I have no doubt that Jerry would love to be Foreign Minister.
He has a relish for it, doesn't he?
Yes, he does, and always has had. And of course, as you pointed out in the interview, he has been Foreign Minister for a time. I think the party probably has other ideas about that. I think he'll be somewhat reluctantly pushed into being Speaker. I think he'd make a good speaker, but whether he's enthusiastic for the job will be another thing.
This does need to be, the Pacific needs to be, because during COVID, Kamal's argument was that actually, yes, the Pacific was neglected by New Zealand. That was just a feature of being sort of locked down in the bubble, fighting the pandemic. And we have seen a sort of a small step up from the government this year and other countries, but this does really need to be a focus for our government, doesn't it?
Well, it's going to be very interesting because if they do have the portfolio of the Pacific peoples, Shane Reti, the National Party MP, held that portfolio in opposition, but they don't have a Pacifica MP that they could give that to in a cabinet or outside of cabinet. So it's really important because it's not only the Pacific community, which is along with Australia, New Zealand's closest and most important relationship, not only not having that voice at the table or in the executive, but also to be able to really connect deeply into the community and have that direct access to them from the community into the government, the two-way street as well.
I would agree, and I think for too long, National would say to you, well, of course, we've got the Pacific Blues, which is the Pacifica part of the party, but they've suffered in recent years because what they've done is they've tacked Pacifica candidates onto the list and really not made them a part of the warp and weft of the electoral process. And I think they've really got to make huge efforts in that regard to be more representative in future.
What I would say is, I was talking to some people from National yesterday, and they said that since Luxon's won, they've had huge increase in interest of Pacifica people wanting to get involved, get on the list. But I think the issue, and Afra and I said this many times, is that they don't get put into winnable areas and winnable seats.
That's
but
the
I mean,
problem.
the other side of it is that Labour, Opito never sat within the executive. He was always a minister outside of cabinet, even though he was the minister for Pacific peoples. And so I think Barbara Edmonds was the first time you had a minister for Pacific peoples in a while anyway, in cabinet. And so Labour hasn't potentially done what they needed to do to help Pacifica people feel like they were getting, progress.
Yeah, and so there's an opportunity there perhaps as well for National to step into. But we are going to have to leave it there for a second. Of course, we're going to bring you right back because we've got a breakdown coming up of what happened this week